Hey guys, BuildZoid here, and welcome to weekly HWbot score roundup number 5. We're going to try something different today. Instead of having a few scores and trying to talk a lot about them, we've got a ton of scores, and I'm going to try to talk less about each of them individually. So, so we cover more variety of hardware, and I have to do less like figuring out whose score I want to include within, the time I have to do the video. So, let's jump right into it, starting off with Yosariani Lives GPUPie for CPU 1 billion score. So this is a OpenCL benchmark for CPUs. It calculates 1 billion digits of the number pi, and he's got the world record for a quad-core CPU in this with a Ryzen 3 5300G at just under 5.5 gigahertz. He ran this on a Asus ROG Strix B550i Gaming. And he got the CPU because that's a 5300G. That's that's the Zen 3 APU, quad-core Zen 3 APU. And the thing is, AMD does not sell these CPUs at retail. So the way Yos got this CPU is he actually pulled it out of a pre-built. Apparently, I think that we're going to see a lot more people do that because this thing for GPU Pi is absolutely overpowered. At 5.5 gigahertz, it is more than a minute faster than a 7 gigahertz 7740X. So I'm really excited about this because the quad-core CPU, basically the only competitive quad-core chip there is until the 5300G came along was the 7740X and the 7700K. And those CPUs have thermal paste, and it's annoying to deal with thermal paste when it comes to LN2 overclocking. So it's really cool to see some more competition in the quad-core categories in the form of the 5300G, and in GPU Pi, the CPU is just absolutely insane. Also, the memory settings that these APUs can run are also just insane. This is DDR4 5000, 16, 16, 16. With also 2500 megahertz Infinity Fabric clock, because APUs are monolithic. So the Infinity Fabric doesn't have to go through the substrate, and therefore it can clock way higher than what you can do on regular Ryzen chips. So yeah, very cool score. I don't really like the choice of the motherboard, but there's the awkward thing with this is that the Strix B550i Gaming has the best memory topology that Asus just has in their motherboard lineup. It has a better memory topology than the Crosshair 8 Impact because it's a newer board. However, because it's a Strix board and not a real ROG board, it has a memory voltage limit of 1.8 volts, and the VTT DDR adjustment is in the wrong direction. So I'm sure if the board actually let him, Yos would have run even more aggressive memory settings because this is kind of loose. But yeah, with the voltage restrictions that this board has, unless you volt mod it, this is kind of the limits of what you can do. Because if you want to go any faster, you just need more voltage. There's not really much else you can do about it. But yeah, still a very, very solid score, and I'm just excited to see a new king of the quad cores, at least for some benchmarks. Because he also ran Cinebench R20, and I mean, still a very strong result, right? 4th place. He beat my 7740X, and I was running 6.8 gigahertz. Also, my score is not actually that efficient if we look at it. All right, I'm at 6.8, behind people who are running 50 megahertz less. So yeah, I need to fix that. Unfortunately, that score is from the session I did with the X299 OC formula, and the VRM would freeze over, so I didn't have as much time to dial it in as I wanted. But anyway, Yos at 5.5 gigahertz is getting a 4th place score with that 5300G, and this time he's running even higher memory settings because Cinebench really doesn't care too much about memory stability, whereas I'm guessing GPU Pi does. This isn't really a benchmark I run very much. And I forgot to mention, this is very multi-threaded for CPUs. And I think it might use AVX acceleration. The thing is, it uses OpenCL, so OpenCL actually is weird in that there's an OpenCL runtime thing that you have to install for OpenCL to work, and different versions of the OpenCL stuff make the benchmarks run faster. So it's a bit I guess it would be kind of you basically have driver updates for your CPU with OpenCL benchmarks. So Anyway, you don't have that for Cinebench, and Cinebench also just doesn't care that much about memory stability. So here we're running it, here Yoss is running it at DDR4 5100, 16, 16, 16, 38. Also, why he didn't lower the TRC timing, I have no idea. Like, this actually really hurts. Your TRC is pretty useful for performance. I don't know why he's running it at 116. And then apparently even higher Infinity Fabric clock. So, yeah. Like the 5300G just looks like, like if you could buy this, this would be such a cool quad-core CPU to mess with. Also, it has an iGPU, which would be another fun thing to mess with. And then AMD's like pre-builts only. So yeah, that's really annoying. Like I was really excited for the 5300G. Like this was the APU that I was excited for. I know like there's the 5600G and the 5700G, and those get a retail release, but those are expensive and they don't compete in the quad-core benchmark categories. So I'm not quite so like they're going up against like the 11900K and the 5800X and the 5600X, and I don't really think they have a chance against those. Whereas the 5300G, I mean, there isn't a 5300X or a 5400X, right? This is the newest and fastest quad core there is currently. So yeah, a bit of a shame that you're gonna have to like tear down a pre-built to get it, or you can order it, I think, on like AliExpress or something. But still, very cool scores from Yoss, and just yeah, it's great to see a new quad core, new fast quad-core CPU that can be overclocked, because there are like there's plenty of locked quad-core chips still around. So congrats to Yoss on the world record in quad-core GPU Pi and the 4th place in Cinebench R20 for quad-core. Anyway, next, Splave managed to retake first place for HWbot X265 with 4K. With the Ryzen 7 5800X. So this is a video encoding benchmark. It encodes a 4K video. It's very multi-threaded and very heavy. This is quite sensitive to stability. It also benefits from dual rank. So as you can see, we've got 4 memory sticks. Each of those sticks is single rank. So with 4 of them on a dual channel CPU, you get a dual rank memory configuration out of that. Splave is supported by ASRock, so he's benching on an ASRock X570 Aqua. And also, if you're wondering about the yellow stuff, that's just Plastidip, which I'm a big fan of as a insulation method, because it's really clean. You do it like if you do it once and you do it like if you do it right, you can only do it once, which is really cool. Like you can run the same same insulation basically forever. Like if you do it correctly the first time. If you don't do it correctly the first time, then you're gonna kind of hate yourself. Because this stuff is annoying to get off of motherboards, because like it seeps under components and everything, which is why which is how it gets you like really good insulating properties. But yeah, then if you like you're gonna basically, if you want to properly clean it off, you end up having to use a solvent to get it off, because it just sticks around like component legs and that kind of thing. Anyway, so Splave pushed the 5800X all the way to 6 gigahertz. And the memory is running at basically daily settings, because again, this is a benchmark that does care about stability quite a bit. And also on LN2, the Ryzen memory controllers get a bit weird, so you can't quite push them as hard as you would really like to. And the thing is, for a little while, this benchmark was dominated by the 11900K. Well, not dominated, because as you can see in 5th place we have a 5800X over here, and the gap in the score is not that big. That's less than a frame. However, yeah, for a little while, for a while, SafeDisk with his 11900K actually had the record for this benchmark, and Splave has now reclaimed first place with his 5800X at 6 gigahertz. So awesome score! Congratulations to Splave on that. Let's move on to the next score, and the next score is Bull Ant's 3D Mark 2001 SE. So this is one of those old GPU benchmarks that I basically don't know anything about. With a GTX 780. So, of course, this is the fastest run on a GTX 780 ever. The 11900K is very helpful in achieving that. However, it's also the 4th fastest run just in general for this benchmark. And for the world record point situation, what's going on there is actually if you run multiple GPUs, your CPU overhead goes up, and so the benchmark runs slower the more GPUs you throw at it. So single GPU cards actually get the world record, single GPU setups get the world records in this benchmark, and currently the top score is with a 980 Ti, because this benchmark I believe also runs best on Windows XP. So you can't run it on any GPUs that don't have proper Windows XP drivers, which I believe is everything 10 series and newer. And also you can see the frame rates over there, and like we're in the thousands. So this is like, it's an interesting benchmark in that, like, and the thing is, Bullant is apparently just testing this. So this is just like a pre-testing score, and he's already in the, you know, top four in the world for this benchmark. GPU and CPU on LN2. GPU seems to be that's a Lightning card. Yeah, that's an MSI GTX 780 Lightning. Gigabyte Z590 Aorus Tachyon for the motherboard. And, you know, his memory settings are a bit relaxed. CPU's at 6.7 gigahertz. This really looks like he's still, like, dialing the OS to me because, you know, he's at 5 cores, 5 threads because this is it's not really a multi-threaded benchmark. So you disable hyper-threading to get more single-threaded performance. You disable any unnecessary cores to get more single-threaded performance. And yeah, so this doesn't really look maxed out. This more looks like this really does look like pre-testing, which, you know, that makes sense with that comment. But a pre-test that gets 4th place in the world for this benchmark. So I'm guessing we might see 3D Mark 2000, like the world record for 3D Mark 2001 SE, fall sometime soon with an 11900K. And probably a 980 Ti, because I believe there's like the 980 Ti, the 980 Ti is just evidently just faster. Like, this is the only 780 in the top, like, 10. So, yeah, very cool score. I don't, unfortunately, I don't know much about the benchmark, but, yeah, like, the old record has been around for a while, so, you know, with the 7740X right here at 7.1 gigahertz. So it's about time this got beaten by some, you know, newer CPU. Like, you'd like to believe that Intel is actually making progress. Be kind of funny if the 7740X held on until like the next next Intel CPU release. And if those don't clock high enough, then the 7740X could actually hold on for even longer than that, which would be kind of funny, and especially because this is like basically a single-threaded benchmark as far as I know, and the 11900K is just doing a really great job in a lot of other CPU benchmarks, and then there's this where it's like, I'm guessing a lot of it just comes down to like figuring out what OS to run this on and getting that OS to perform properly, which is probably why this score looks like basically pre-testing. So anyway, next score, well, so congratulations to Bullant on the 4th place. And let's move on to the next score, which is Bisso's Cinebench R20 with a 11900K. Well, this guy basically made an entrance to Hardwarebot with just benching 3090s at insane clock speeds, and it seems like he's branching out. Now he's pushing 11900Ks as well, so that's good to see. Maximus 13 Apex motherboard, ROG memory, the G-Skill memory, and the 11900K at 6.5 gigahertz, which gets him into 6th place for 8-core CPUs running Cinebench R20. Memory running DDR4 5016, 1717. Cinebench, again, like, the timings aren't, like, these aren't the tightest timings I've ever seen for Samsung VDI running at those kinds of frequencies, but this is Cinebench. You don't really have to you don't have to push the memory that hard. And, yeah, just an all-around solid score. Nice setup here with lots of insulation. You can't even see the motherboard at all. Those look like paper towels to me. I'm not a big fan of those because they tend to disintegrate when they get wet, which, like, blue shop towels don't do. Blue shop towels basically stay a lot more together when they're wet. So, yeah, but still, very solid score from him. And I'm guessing he's going to be doing more benchmarks than just this in the future. But Cinebench is like a nice, easy to start with benchmark, right? Like, you don't have to worry too much about like pushing the memory settings to ridiculous levels or anything like that. And there's no like weird balancing act between like memory performance, core clock, and like uncore clock and that kind of thing. So, yeah, congratulations to Bisso on the 6th place. And let's move on onto the next score. Which is Xerox 77's Cinebench R20 with a 5950X at 5.85 gigahertz on a Crosshair 8 Dark Hero. No system picture, unfortunately. And it looks like this chip really doesn't like cold, as he's basically running like 3200 CL14. At the same time, this is Cinebench, so it probably doesn't affect his score too much. Yeah, 5950X at 5.85 gigahertz, which is quite highly clocked. Gets him to 10th place in the 16-core category, but I think this category actually has a lot of competition in it. Yep. Though it looks like he needs to work a little bit on his efficiency, because there's people with lower clocked CPUs beating him. So that's something to look into. Like that's like basically if you can't beat the score above you with with the same, if you can't match the score above you with the same clocks, you need to do something with like usually your OS or your memory settings, which in with Ryzen chips, like potentially depending on, you know, if the chip doesn't or does like cold, the memory settings, you might kind of just be stuck with whatever the chip is willing to run. But still, a very, very solid score, right? Ryzen chips aren't exactly easy to run on LN2 because they do have a lot of weird behaviors. And so congratulations to Xerox77 on pushing that 5950X to 10th place in the 16-core Cinebench R20 rack category. Let's move on to the next score. And next, we have, wait a minute, these are out of order. This one was supposed to be ahead of the other one. Anyway, we've got Unity of Saints, Ycruncher Pi 1 billion on the 3300X. Yeah, competing against some very highly clocked very highly clocked KB Lake chips. Yeah. So this is the thing, like 3300X, right? This is like the fastest quad core AMD made until the 5300G came along. And like it's just not strong enough. You know, like it doesn't clock high enough to beat the 6+ gigahertz 7740Xs in this benchmark. This benchmark is ridiculously heavy, by the way. That's why the clocks in this are so much lower than in say GPU-Pi for those 7740Xs. Like you are not going to be running this at 7 gigahertz. Ycruncher is way too hot and power hungry for that. Also very just stability sensitive, and it loves memory speed. So anyway, Unity of Saints pushed the 3300X all the way to just under, well, actually that's just 5.4 gigahertz. The BCLK is just not reading out as 100. 2666, 4133, 141515 on the memory, which, yeah, kind of loose on the memory timings, also kind of low on the memory frequency. I'm surprised he didn't manage to push it further, but again, like, this is Ycruncher. It really doesn't appreciate, like, this benchmark is like a whole different level of what you can run and can't run compared to like all the other CPU benchmarks out there. So yeah, this kind of looks low to me if I judge it based on other benchmarks, but again, this is Ycruncher. This might legitimately be about the, like, pretty much be the limit of what is possible in terms of like getting the benchmark to still pass. Unity was using a ROG Crosshair 8 Impact. Here's the setup with the LN2 pop. Only 2 mounting rods. I'm guessing, he probably has an Intel mounting bracket. Or he just couldn't be bothered to set it up properly. Which really does, like, the nice thing about Ryzen chips is, like, for all their weird cold behavior, at least they're soldered, so you can't, like, have the thermal paste fail. And also, this is a 3300X. It doesn't put out that much heat. It's a quad core. So, yeah, anyway, and then here we have the Elmore Labs KTH thermometer. So if you want something to just read thermocouples, this is actually a really good option because it's much cheaper than like Fluke meters, which is what a lot of people also use. Anyway, so congrats to Unity on pushing that, like, second place on the 3300X, which unfortunately isn't worth any points because there's not, like, this chip is stupid rare. Like, this had a retail release, but they just didn't make that many of them. And then, you know, like, for 8th place for the quad-core Ycruncher category. So congratulations to Unity of Saints on that. Let's move on to the next score, which is Spit 051261's Unigen Super Precision 8K optimized with an RTX 3090. He managed to push it on LN2 into 8th place in the single GPU category, which is a very solid result. And he seems to be really like I think this guy, looking at his profile, he's very new to HWbot. So yeah, that's a solid result for what I'm assuming is, you know, maybe like the first run with that card on LN2, running a 3090 Kingpin edition. You can tell from the gold, the heat sinks and the gold trim on the PCB over there. 5950X at just under 5 gigahertz, though. I'm not sure that for superposition your CPU really matters that much, but still, that 5950X is going real fast. That's on phase change, of course. You're not hitting those kinds of clock speeds on water cooling unless the water cooling is heavily chilled and running more antifreeze than water in the loop. Anyway, what's kind of like, I feel bad for him because he's gotten just on 7th place is 5 points away, which is just like hopefully he'll rerun this and manage to squeeze out those extra 5 points or even extra 50 points. Like, he's really not far off of getting top 6 here. It's just that, yeah, for first set, like, as long as the card survives, you can always come back and try again, right? And 3090s are very difficult to run on LN2, at least from what I've seen and I've been told, because I don't have one. I've not tried, and yeah, I don't have one, and I'm not going to be getting one well, probably ever, because I got a 6900 XT at this point. So yeah, I'm just going to work on that instead. But anyway, still a very solid result, right? For like somebody just starting out on with LN2 overclocking. So congratulations to Spit on the 8th place in Superposition 8K optimized single GPU. And next we have Matt 26 LFC's Geekbench 3 single core with the 4790K. And so this is a so now we're going into the hardware records, where basically the scores are like fastest 4790K to ever run the benchmark, or fastest GTX 970 to ever run the benchmark. So yeah, Matt here pushed the 4790K to 6.1 gigahertz on just 2 cores and 2 threads, because this is single core Geekbench. We're not looking at the multi-core score, we're looking at single core. 2666, 812, 8 on the memory, which I don't know much about DDR3, but this is kind of what you generally, like, this is like a good DDR3 memory kit. An insane DDR3 memory kit would be like 813.8 at 2800. Yeah, the solid memory, like that's a solid memory overclock right there, running on the ASRock Z97 OC formula, which from what I've heard is like the best Z97 overclocking motherboard there is. I actually have one of those, thanks to somebody selling one on eBay with like a couple bent pins in the socket. And it works. Like, well, luckily for me, the pins that bent weren't very important because they were in the power delivery section of the socket. So I think I'm missing like a ground and a V-core. So, I mean, VCC in. So yeah, that really doesn't matter. Still, just awesome score, right? There's actually like there's a lot of competition on the 4790K. Like it's back when Intel CPU, like, to be fair, like it was a quite expensive CPU, but not as expensive as they are now. And usually the sort of like high-end Intel CPUs just do get a lot of competition because, well, they're fast. Like at the time that they're released, they're just straight up some of the fastest CPUs for single-threaded benchmarks there are. So you obviously get a lot of competition in them. And so yeah, Matt managed to just barely squeeze another 3 points out of his setup to beat second place. And still, first place is first place. So congratulations to Matt on pushing that 4790K to first place in Geekbench 3 single core. And let's move on to the, well, first place in the 4790K category for Geekbench 3 single core. And let's move on to the next score, which is White Shark's 3D Mark Vantage performance on the GTX 970. Now, he is running the GTX 970 on LN2, and he is hitting, like, not water-cooled clocks. But that 5950X is carrying this super freaking hard. 3D Mark Vantage, I like 3D Mark Vantage, because, like, you still have to push the GPU a bit, but also, yeah, if your CPU score is, like, over 100,000 points and your GPU is doing, like, just under 65,000, the CPU is very much carrying that overall score. And the thing is, White Shark here isn't the first person to come up with that idea. Like, this is just the classic way to run, this is how you run Vantage. You get a really high, like, you get a 16-core CPU, and because Vantage is old and doesn't know what to do with more than 16 threads, you have to disable the extra threads. Like, you have to disable SMT, as you can see in this score. Because if you don't disable SMT, your score will suck. Like, really badly suck, okay? If you don't disable SMT, the CPU score absolutely tanks. But anyway, so yeah, it's not like... So initially it might look like, why are you running a top-of-the-line 5950X with a GTX 970? But this is just how everybody runs Vantage on HWbot. It's like, if you're running Vantage and you're not running it with a 16-core CPU, you're probably doing it wrong. Well, there are some exceptions. There are like GPUs that are so fast that the 16-core CPUs can't keep up with them, and then you might want to run like an 11900K or a 10900K, because those have more single-threaded performance to, sustain the insane frame rates that you get in the GPU tests, which a 970 isn't going to do that, right? We're still at around 200 FPS. But, still, White Shark did push the clocks on the 970 higher than everybody else, in like everybody else in second and like third place. And then also the CPU's at 5.5 gigahertz. Memory settings, I have no idea why he's running like CJR settings. Like this is literally like this looks like Hynix CJR, which I really hope it isn't, because it's like you have a 5950X and you're running it with CJR. Are you serious? Like, I think he like the thing is on LN2 again, and also this is Vantage. The CPU score does improve with memory settings, but not that much. So it's not that important to be running insane memory settings. And yeah, so a very solid score from White Shark there. I'm sure we're gonna see like this is one of those GPU categories which unfortunately right now getting a GTX 970 is like super difficult because GPU shortage, but or like it's not super difficult. It's just super expensive. Like you don't want to be paying like GTX 970. Like the current GTX 970 prices are not okay. In the past, this would be one of those GPUs that I would think is really fun to mess with because it wouldn't cost you so much. It's actually decently fast. It's not like you're running something super low end. And so this would be a cool card to mess with. And I'd expect like I'm sure we're going to see more competition for this because I mean there's already kind of a lot of competition right there. Like these are some very recognizable names at the top of that ranking. If you pay attention to sort of like like older GPU benching on HWbot, like yeah, these are very recognizable names. So yeah, I'm sure we'll see more competition with this. And I forgot to mention White Shark is running the Gigabyte X570 Aorus Master. So yeah, congrats to him on pushing that GTX 970 to first place, even though it's getting kind of carried by that 5950X. Let's move on to the next score. Char 00750's 3D Mark Vantage... Wait, what? No, that's from there. Crazy 85's Wprime 32M with an i7 860. So what is this? This is LGA 1156? Yes, LGA 1156. Not a super, like, it's kind of funny. Like, 1366 is very popular, 775 is very popular, 1156 isn't. And then, like, 1155 and all the newer platforms are. And 1156 is sort of left out. And I believe a big part of it is because the CPUs just don't clock that high. Like, yeah, for whatever reason, they just don't clock that high. But anyway, Crazy 85 here has managed to push that i7 860 to 5.1 gigahertz to run Wprime 32M, which is a multi-threaded CPU benchmark in 4 seconds and 718 milliseconds, getting him fifth place in the i7 860 category. I'm so used to Intel chips having 4-digit names that it's just like saying 860 is hard. Yeah, so, you know, he pushed that CPU to a very solid result. Wprime 2M is one of those benchmarks that does care a lot about the OS you're running it on, because it's an old benchmark. So Windows XP is the OS of choice here. MSI P550 GD65 motherboard. That chipset heatsink looks really underpowered. And man, I love these memory sticks. Like old DDR3 memory sticks with just the insane like heat spreaders are just, I love those things. They look awesome. We need that on DDR4. We totally need that on DDR4. Or maybe DDR5. Hey, yeah, so I want these heat spreaders for DDR5. But anyway, awesome score, right? Also, memory settings we're looking at. I have no idea what LGA 1156 does for memory, but that's like solid DDR3 memory settings, right? That's almost DDR3 2000 at 676. So that's going to be LP to hypermemory, I'm guessing. Oh yeah, just all-around solid score from Crazy here on the i7 860. So congrats to him on that, and let's move on to the next score, which is TerraRaptor's SuperPi 32 million with the Core i3-2120. This is locked. This is not an overclockable CPU, but this man does not care, like, at all, that this CPU is not supposed to be overclocked. So 109 BCLK, everything on phase change, right? Memory on phase change, CPU on phase change, PSC memory chips, and running, what is that? That's DDR3-2340? 5106 CL5. Now, Sandy Bridge unfortunately just doesn't clock memory it doesn't do high memory clocks, but that doesn't stop you from dropping the timings to the ground, and so that's what we're looking at, right? CL5. TRCD10. TRCD with PSC memory, TRCD scales with temperature. So actually, if he was running these memory sticks even colder, the TRCD might come down further. But with just single stage phase change, yeah, that's going to be limited to 10 on his particular kit. So 5, 10, 6, 21, 1T command rate. This is a dual rank memory setup, which, like, for DDR3, you can pretty much, if there's a good score on DDR3, you can assume that it's on dual rank, because DDR3 just generally doesn't clock high enough to justify running single rank memory configurations. Like, dual rank on DDR3 has a huge advantage over single rank. Anyway, so yeah, he managed to push SuperPi, push this i3-2120 to running SuperPi in 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So also a very patient overclocker, because I'm not running an 8-minute benchmark. I just know. But yeah, beating Bulant's score by like 400 milliseconds. And that's kind of the cool thing about these locked CPUs, is just like, you really, like, the scores, there's... Like, you're not going to be, like, outbinning... Well, actually, you do have to bin i3-2120s, because the BCLK capabilities of the chips vary chip to chip. And still, it's a cool category in that, like, it's really... Like, it's all about dialing in your operating system, and then, of course, like, you do need to sort of find a great CPU. There's later locked CPUs where this isn't as much of an issue, because you can't just clock the BCLK as high as you like, or more like as high as the silicon permits, right? Because if the silicon affects the max BCLK, then yeah, it's going to be, you're going to be binning chips for max BCLK capability, which apparently is very difficult. Like, it's not super easy to test for that. But yeah, a cool category, because you don't have, like, the first place isn't like a 100 or 200 megahertz higher clock than second place. So the scores are really close together, and everybody's just running absolutely ridiculous memory settings within the limits of what the CPUs will allow. So yeah, locked CPU benching is just kind of cool in that, where you just have you just have more interesting restrictions than you have on some of the other CPUs. Then again, it's not really, like, also it's not something I would necessarily get into that much, because yeah, there's a lot. Well, I'm not that into SuperPi or memory tuning, so this is not exactly something I would be doing. But these are cool scores to look at, because it's just like, these CPUs aren't meant to be overclocked. So anyway, congratulations to TerraRaptor on that insane i3-2120 and those memory settings, and just overall, that, and the overall SuperPi 32 million score. And let's move on to AKM's GTX 980, which got dragged to first place in 3D Mark 05 by an 11900K. Like, yes, the GTX 980 has an LN2 pot strapped to it, but he's running it at stock. Like, he's literally running it at stock, because 3D Mark 05 is one of those old GPU benchmarks that is is just completely CPU bottlenecked. So, he did push the 11900K to 6.8 gigahertz, right? So, that does, like, it's just kind of like, this is technically a CPU benchmark, as far as I'm concerned. It's still this is not, like, an easy score to get. Right, like, you still have to push an 11900K all the way to 6.8 gigahertz, 4 cores, 4 threads, old benchmark. You don't need multi-thread, like, you don't need a bajillion threads. Memory running, what is that? 4530, no. Yeah, no, 45, like, that's like 4560? I can't math. Anyway, like, 4,500 something, 14, 13, 13, 28, 20, at 1T command rate, which that is actually that should be pretty easy settings on a rocket-like CPU in terms of memory. And yeah, he should have pushed the GPU, especially since this is one of those really, like, this is an e-powered GTX 980. And this is done by Miller. So yeah, like, man, the guy who builds these e-powers, like, they're always so clean. Like, they're always so clean. And then people run freaking 3D Mark 05 on these cards and don't take advantage of the e-power at all. So this is a VRM replacement. If you're wondering what you're looking at here, this literally just replaces the stock VRM of the GPU. Yeah, still, congratulations to AKM on really pushing that 11900K and then just, like, relaxing on the GTX 980. There's other benchmarks he ran with the GTX 980 where he actually is pushing the card, but this is the best result he got out of that card because, well, The thing with e-power cards is even like a lot of the time e-power cards just don't clock that high because of not like well like they're not going to clock as high as just say a really well built GTX. Like if the VRM was just natively designed to come with the card, that'll work better. You still need a good VRM. Like this will easily crush a reference PCB because the reference PCBs usually have totally garbage power delivery, especially for like 900 series NVIDIA GPUs. The reference PCBs are trash, but yeah, compared to like say a 980 classified, the classified is just going to like is generally going to clock higher because there's just like just having the VRM attached like this just never works as well as the VRM being part of the card to begin with. But still, a very cool score, and I mostly wanted to include this one because we have this amazing e-power, e-power mod to look at. And yeah, so congrats to AKM on the CPU benchmark with that 11900K. And well, yeah. Anyway, so congrats to him on the first place, and let's move on to the next score, which is Simi37's 3D Mark Firestrike Ultra with a GTX 750 Ti. He managed to push it to second place with a, like, he's really hammering his Ryzen 5 3600 over here. 1.48 volts. I'm not sure, that's probably somewhat accurate, to get 4.35 gigahertz. So this is probably a relatively early production 3600. Because, well, later production 3600s should clock significantly better than that. And then the 750 Ti is, maxed out. Well, obviously it's maxed out for this benchmark in his system, right? So 1500 megahertz core, 1539 on the memory, and he manages to get into second place with just the stock air cooler. I hope he mods the card, right? Like he's pushing the CPU quite hard. I'm hoping that this isn't his only GPU and that he goes and takes it further. Like, as far as I know, Maxwell cards don't really scale with voltage at ambient, but it would be interesting to see if, like I'd guess the smaller chips might be a little bit more tolerant of extra core voltage, because that's generally a thing with, say, AMD GPUs of the 28 nanometer also behave like that, because they just run cooler all the time compared to the big chips, which just pull a lot of power even at stock voltage. So hopefully he'll push this a bit further. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to be beating first place anytime soon, because first place in this category belongs to 12. And for those of you who don't know who 12 is, he runs very low-end GPUs on extremely overpowered cooling systems. So that is that's a cascade phase change on the CPU and a cascade phase change on the GPU. So 1765 on the core with 1550 on the memory. So yeah, I don't think Simi37's ever going to beat that score. Also, I will say, for Firestrike Ultra, I'm really surprised nobody has run this on a 4GB 750 Ti, which admittedly are kind of rare, but the thing is, Firestrike Ultra is a 4K benchmark. It runs very badly, in my experience, with 2GB GPUs. In fact, for like a GTX 680, the best way to get a good score in Firestrike Ultra is to just get a GTX 680 with 4GB of VRAM, because Firestrike Ultra just does not fit in 2GB of VRAM. So I'm really surprised that nobody's run a 4GB 750 Ti, because those do exist. They are kind of rare, but like, we have people strapping phase change to 750 Ti's. I don't think, going out and finding a 750 Ti with 4GB of VRAM to begin with is that much of a stretch when people are willing to strap phase change to these things. So, yeah, but for now, as far as I can tell, nobody's brought a 4GB 750 Ti. And the thing I'm kind of I suspect a 4GB 750 Ti could, I'm not sure. Maybe the card is so slow that the whole running out of space in the VRAM isn't actually an issue. But if it is an issue, a 4GB, a 4GB card could be a, massive performance advantage in this benchmark. But so far, nobody's run one of those. So, yeah. Anyway, congratulations to Simi37 on pushing that 750 Ti to second place. That's still a solid result right there. So congrats to him on that score, and let's move on to the last score of this week's roundup, which is Urakaze39's 3D Mark Vantage performance on a GeForce GT 540M. Yeah, a laptop GPU. Overclock, all the things. Now, I do know that laptop overclocking is a thing, but it's not that much of a thing. It's not really a thing you see very frequently on Hardwarebot, but apparently the GT 540M, you can overclock it a ton. Like, that is a very, very big overclock right there, right? That's 875 megahertz on the core from a stock clock of 672. I wonder how much voltage adjustment you have available on laptops. But anyway, that's a 30% core clock overclock. And also the memory is, a similar situation. What? Where we're going from 800 to 1040, which is also a 30% memory overclock, right? So 30% on the core, 30% on the memory. And this is a Fermi card. I think this is voltage limited. I'm pretty sure this is voltage limited. It's probably power delivery limited as well. I can't imagine the laptop is exactly designed to max out one of these, a GT540. Like, if you just keep shoving voltage into it, I'm pretty sure eventually you'll just break the laptop's, this will be soldered to the motherboard of the laptop. Yeah, so it'll just break the power delivery on the motherboard at some point. I'd love to see somebody volt mod a notebook. Volt mod and power mod a notebook. I would hope that there is some kind of power limiting mechanism, so you'd have to disable that also. And the reason I would hope that there's a power limiting mechanism is it's a notebook. You don't really want a GPU to be able to pull all the power it could ever ask for, right? Yeah. Still, a really cool score, managed to push that GT540M to first place in this ranking. And there's like a surprising amount of competition, especially like, who knew people were this interested in pushing GT540s? So yeah, like doing 800 core is actually apparently pretty regular on this GPU. And I'm surprised that like this score isn't at the top. I can't imagine that he isn't running. Is it just a CPU thing? Oh no, his GPU score is just really low for some reason. That's an i7. Yeah, that's weird. Is this bouncing off the power limit or something? That is really weird. Man, this is an interesting category. And I can't imagine these laptops being super expensive, because like that's a GT540. That's not exactly a high-end GPU, and this is with an i5-2410. Like, this is Sandy Bridge. These are ancient. These should be pretty cheap. So this would be an interesting thing to like mess with someday. Not something I'm going to be, like, I'm not going to do this anytime soon. I have way too much other stuff to work on. But, this kind of thing is, like, I really wonder if you could, like, volt mod a laptop GPU and get the core to do a gigahertz. Because this is Fermi. It should be possible to do a gigahertz, or close to a gigahertz. Though this is a really little Fermi core, so it might do a gigahertz. Yeah, but still, really cool score from Orakaze39 here. For 3D Mark Vantage, and so congrats to him on that. And that is the last score of this week's HWbot score roundup. I gotta say, I do now that I've finished the video, I do prefer this format. Just lots of scores, lots of scores, because that way I don't feel like I'm trying to pad out the runtime by talking more about like a couple really good scores, and instead just have a big variety of scores, right? Yeah, I think we're gonna do it this way going forward. Though maybe I pushed it a little bit too far with this score lineup because we're at like over 40 minutes. But still, congratulations. Well, just obviously I didn't include every top score that came out this last week. So I probably I know for a fact that I've missed a few scores. Because of course, like, I do need to make some choices. The video would go on forever if I just included every score that was highly ranked. But still, congratulations to everybody on their scores. And that's it for the video. So thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. And if you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I have a Patreon. There's a link to that down in the description below. There's also the AHOC Teespring store where we have shirts, posters, the usual YouTuber merch. You can there's a link to that down in the description below as well. And yeah, Patreon and Teespring help out immensely with running the channel, so it would be much appreciated if you'd check those out. And that's it for the video. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.